Hello and welcome to the first of the videos covering a look at the Chaos Fleet in Battlefleet Gothic Armada. So in this video we're going to look over the different ships composing the Chaos Fleet, and we're going to look at all their different characteristics, weapons, traits and orders. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into this. So we're going to start at the bottom, and here we have the transporters. So if we just have a look at their characteristics quickly, we will see hull integrity is at 200, shields at 250. Now their base is actually 200, I just have the shield upgrade on them. Speed 112, rotation is 20 degrees a second, armor 50 front, 25 side, 25 back, 3 defensive turrets, a troop value of 60 and a 5,000 detection range. So these are fairly standard sort of characteristics for a transport. The speed's relatively slow by comparison to the other ships in the fleet. Other than that, it's mostly the same as what you'd expect for an escort ship. So with the armor, 25 is the lowest you can get. So once their shields are gone, they will actually take damage fairly quickly. Except for if getting shot at by the front, but that's pretty much not going to happen in the escort missions. Right, so moving on to their weapons. So they come with a single light missile pod turret. So not much to speak of, not really doing a lot, but then again they're not really meant for combat. This won't even help them against escort ships that might be trying to chase them down. Okay, so traits. They have chaos accuracy. Again, not a particularly important thing, but as this is the general chaos accuracy, we'll just have a quick look. So for chaos, macro weapons does also include their missile turrets. So at 3k it's 80%, 6k it's 60%, 9k 40% and 12k 20%. Like I said, this is the standard chaos accuracy, so this is going to apply to all ships. Chaos maneuvers, again standard across the Chaos Fleet, so gives a little bit of a fluff reason as to why, but they get the exact same as the Imperial Navy, so all ahead full and the highest energy turn maneuvers, so they can turn a little bit quicker and they can charge forward quickly. That one in particular is helpful. So loyalty, again standard across the Chaos Fleet, not particularly of importance with any of the escort ships as they will never run from battle, but as you can see, 30% chance at 30% of hull integrity, 12% for a line ship loss and 3% for an escort ship loss. And they have the escort ship trait as they are part of them. So this just means that essentially they take more damage from area of effect skills or attacks, and macro weapons aiming at them have a 20% reduced accuracy. So this does help with their survivability, but depending on what you're coming up against, macro weapons may not be your biggest threat. Right, so moving on to orders. So again, fairly standard set for all species. Reload, so essentially just lowers the cooldown on pretty much everything. And yeah, duration 45 seconds, which is nice. Especially for the combustion gauge increase. 2-minute cooldown, and it is affiliated with the deck, so if your deck gets destroyed, none of the orders work. So lock on. The special order lock on, as it says there, allows your ship to focus fire, essentially raising your accuracy, and the critical chances of your ships are augmented by 100%. So as it says there though, only applies to standard weaponry and pulsars, not to torpedoes, ordnances, or any special weapons. Not that Chaos really has them. They do have ordnances, though, so something to keep in mind. Again, 45 seconds, 2-minute cooldown. So what it means by 100%, you're not going to suddenly be able to critically hit with everything. If we come back to our weapon, you can see here the critical chance is 0.75, so it will actually just add another 0.75% to that, taking it to 1.5. That's all it's actually doing. Obviously not in this case being a big deal. 1, it's not a combat ship. 2, yeah, so I mean technically, I mean obviously it looks good, but 1.5 is still quite a low chance. But when we get to the bigger ships and the bigger weapons and you see they have that higher critical chance, you'll see how that can be quite helpful. Brace for impact. Something you'll probably use on these ships along with reload. They're really the only two I tend to use on transports. So we have brace for impact. So this raises its armor by 20. So again, referring back to our armor stats of 50, 25 and 25, we'll actually get it up to 70, 45 and 45. And reduces the accuracy again by 20. So with this on, macro weapons have a 40-point accuracy reduction, so quite a high reduction in their accuracy. So yeah, and again 45 seconds, 2 minute cooldown. Final one, running silent. Yeah, I mean at first look you think, oh, this looks great for this type of ship, and it kind of is for those first 45 seconds, but after that the enemies, if it's a human player, they're going to have a pretty good idea anyhow, and they're going to head for that general direction, or they're going to send off recon probes. If it's the computer, it just doesn't matter, because other than stopping them from firing until they're within their sight range, they actually know where all your ships are. But yes, running silent does give stealth to a ship, so it won't even show up as a blip. So, yeah. Unless it shoots, in which case it does show up as a blip while it's firing, after which it goes back to nothing. And again, that 45 seconds and 2 minute cooldown. Right, and the final thing we can do is emergency repairs. Again, can be quite useful in these ships. 2 hull points a second for 45 seconds, a total of 90 hull points, so just shy of half our total hull. So yeah. Does have that 3 minute cooldown though, so something to keep in mind. Right, so that's the transport ships. Obviously they're only used in one game type, so we're not going to spend too much. So the first of our proper combat ships in the form of this Infidel. So this is the only ship in Chaos that actually comes with a torpedo launcher, just something to keep in mind. But let's have a quick look at its other characteristics first. So we've got hull of 200, shield of 100, speed of 225, a 20 degree a second rotation, detection range of 5,000, a troop value of 60, 6 defensive turrets, and 50 armor all round. Right, so back to our weapons. So as it says there, it does have a Prowl light torpedo launcher, and you can see the exit tubes here. So, torpedoes are relatively good and useful, not something you really tend to see in the Chaos Fleet though, so definitely something you will see come up against though, as both Imperial Navy and Orcs tend to be rather heavy users. Eldar can also have a fair few, so yeah. As it says there, pierces shield, so it just ignores shield, all damage done directly to the hull. So a tiny target, so fighters and turrets firing at it, reduced to 10%, not reduced by, reduced to 10%. So in this case, this has 6 defensive turrets, so it would be firing 6 slots of turrets at it. They fire at a rapid rate, so you still actually will generally take out. 2, for instance, actually don't often get through, but still it's something that's there. Yeah, the stoppable is just like I was saying, it can be taken out by defense turrets and squadrons. Armor piercing, so not only does it ignore your shield, it will actually always count your armor as 25%. So damage is 45, so it is quite a decent chunk of damage. With a 45 second reload, unlimited range, they will just shoot in a straight line, more or less, across the battlefield. Critical chance is 11%, so like I said, once we get to these larger weapons, you can see 11% becomes 22% once we get the lock-on going, so you know, it can actually be quite decent. That's almost a quarter. So, and 4 light missile pod turrets. So these have an angle of fire of 270 degrees front, so they can pretty much shoot all around the ship except for directly behind it. That's what that boils down to. So they only have 1 attack each, 3 damage. So as all 4 will generally be firing at a target, because you want to more or less keep this thing pointed front to get those torpedoes going, you will get, if all hit, you will get 12 points of damage. Yay! Not much, but you know, that's not what they're really here for. So again, accuracy is the same, maneuvers are the same loyalty, and has the escort ship trait. All the same orders as the transport ship. So all our escort ships will have the same traits and orders. It's pretty much just the weapons that change and a little bit in the characteristics. So the Raiders are your bigger ones. So here's our second one. This is the Idolator. As you can see, hull of 200, shield, base is actually 100. Again, I have to upgrade, making it 150. 225 speed, 20 degrees a second rotation. Detection base is 5,000. I have the upgrade increasing it, making it 7.5. Troop value of 60, turrets of 6, and that 50 armor all round. So for weapons, once again, we have 4 light missile pod turrets with that 270 degree frontal arc. And this time, instead of having torpedo launchers, just zoom around, there we go, now you can see it better, we have our light prow lance. So 90 degrees front, so you really want to keep this pointing front. 12 damage, but as you can see, they're armor piercing, so it's not particularly good against shields, but once those shields go down, their armor is always going to be counted as 25. The other positive of lance weapons is they always hit, so you don't have to worry about your accuracy with them. So that is more or less 12 points of guaranteed damage. Obviously the armor will mitigate that a bit, but as you're reducing their armor to 25, yay. Critical chances of 3%, so you know, pretty decent really. It's not actually that bad. 6,000 range, fairly standard. Although for the Chaos Fleet, admittedly, it actually puts it in a pretty short range part of their fleet. Again, all the same traits and all the same orders. Right, and our final escort ship is the Iconoclast. So this is the slightly smaller destroyer. And as you can see here, it only has a hull of 100. Shield, again the base shield is 100, the upgrades given it made it 150. 262 speed, so it is the fastest ship. It's got a 25 degree second rotation. Detection, again base would be 5,000, the upgrade has upped that. Troop value 60, turrets 3, and only 25 armor all round. Comes with 6 light missile pod turrets with that 270 degree frontal arc. All the same traits, all the same orders. Right, so that's the escort ships. Let's get into our slightly meatier ships. We have the light cruisers. Here we have 2. We have the Hellbringer and the Hellbringer Mark II. So let's start by just looking at the Hellbringer. Right, just in case you're wondering, no, this is not how they come looking standard. This is the Zedge favor has been placed on this. If you want to see what they look like standard, I'll just quickly take that off. And as you can see, it's pretty much the same as the escort ships. Lots of red with some gold trimming.
I can see into your mind.
And all favors come with that lovely little bit of audio when you apply them. Right. So, its characteristics. Hull integrity is 600, which is quite decent. Shield of 100, speed of 225. This does actually make them quite quick. rotation of 15 degrees a second, detection, again this has been upgraded through upgrades, so base is 5,000, which is realistically 5,000 is your base on the vast majority of ships in the game. Troop value is 60, 9 defensive turrets, 50 armor all round. So this is the fairly standard armor layout for all Chaos ships. They're not known for having heavy armor. Right, so the weapons on the Hellbringer. This is where we get into our differences really between the Hellbringer and the Hellbringer Mark II. So it comes with 2 heavy macro turrets with a 270-degree frontal arc. As you can see, they are mounted on top there. 3 attacks each, 9 damage per attack, 12,000 range. Their standard range is actually 9,000. I have the upgrade that up these to 12. They've also, the crit chance is a little bit higher as I've placed points into this crew skill appropriate to that. So the reason for upping to 12,000 is because their, what I would say their primary weapon is the Ordnance Launch Bay. So these have a range of 12,000 except for the fighters, and the fighters, at least in my mind, are far more of a defensive attribute, a defensive type of ordnance. As you just launch them, they will stay around the ship until they're all destroyed, and they stop other ordnance, namely the bomber squadrons and the assault boat squadrons, as well as torpedoes from hitting your ship. In saying that, if another ship does move within the 6,000 range, they will attempt to attack it. They won't necessarily do a lot of damage, but they will attempt to. They just generally end up dying. So bomber squadrons are where you really are getting damage from on this. In this instance, they're your attacking wing, and assault boats do assault actions. We'll talk more about those in a second when we get to these orders. Other than that, 60-second cooldown, 360-degree angle of fire. Obviously they're just piloted ships, so they'll fly where they need to attack. Traits, so the typical accuracy, maneuvers, and loyal. We've now lost our escort ships because we're out of the escort ships, and that's what we're left with. Okay, so orders. So across the top here, we've got our normal ones. The Zench one changes, you're running silent, to change, but we'll talk more about that in another video. We have emergency repairs, and then we have enter, and this is one of the things I have with this game. Enter the webway. The only species in this game that actually enters the webway is Eldar. All the others actually just enter the warp. But anyhow, as it says there, the ship will stop and start trying to enter the webway for 15 seconds. There will be a little bar up here above. During that time you can cancel, or it can be cancelled by someone else boarding the ship. And then after that 15 seconds it will be gone from the battlefield, and there is a chance for it to be lost in the warp. When that happens, there are ways of decreasing that chance, but again that'll be talked more about in another video. There is a 180-second cooldown, and you will start the game on cooldown, obviously representing that you've just walked into the area more or less. So this is something to keep in mind. You will not be able to warp out for those first 3 minutes. Just keep that in mind. Now, as it says there, the affiliation is generator. So losing your generator won't actually stop you from warping out, but it does double that delay time. And 30 seconds is quite a long time, especially as when you have no generator, you have no shields. And you're probably trying to warp out because you're already at relatively low health. So yeah, it can be quite harrowing sometimes. Right, boarding action. Now with Chaos, you're probably not going to be using boarding action too often as a general rule, and especially not with these ships, as you don't really want to be in that 2,500 range, which is what's required for this. They're also, it's on the broadside, But you do get 2 assault actions, which is the positive, and it can go through shields. So these are all the things to know about boarding action. So, this reads more or less the same as what your assault boats will do. The only difference is that your assault boats will actually have more. So as it says, perform assault actions from afar. So you can do these things from that. So, your defensive troop value is taken into account. So, a successful boarding action, as it says there, will disable the warp jump, as we were just talking about. What else can it do? Well, can deal permanent critical damages. This means it can take out the 4 subsystems permanently, that being your deck, your generator, your weapons. When in weapons, it will only take out 1 of the weapons, and engines being your last one. So engines will just essentially halve your speed when they're taken out. It doesn't stop you dead. Right, and the final one is lightning strike. So this has all the same effects as the boarding actions, except you will only get 1 assault action with a lightning strike. It is 360 degrees, so it's supposed to be broadside and has that range of 5,000, and its affiliation is generator. So if your generator is taken out, you will not be able to form lightning strikes. Now, actually, the other thing I didn't mention boarding actions can do, apart from those critical hits, is they can just do damage. It'll be called a hull breach when it happens, and you'll just see part of their health disappear. They can also start fires. Fires are essentially damage over time, and if left to run their full time, can actually do a significant amount of damage. Right, so that's the Hellbringer. So what is different with the Hellbringer Mark II? Well, in terms of all our base stats, orders and traits, nothing. We still have our 2 heavy macro turrets on top, but now instead of ordnance bays, we have lance batteries. So 2 of them, 1 on each side. So we've already talked about lances, how they're good. These ones, 4 attacks each, 4 damage per attack, with an 8-second cooldown, reload time, range of 12,000, and that is its base range. Critical chances at 1.5, and has that 90-degree broadside arc. Slightly see them better there now, and of course our heavy macros on top. Other than that, there is no difference between this and the normal Hellbringer. So that's our 2 light cruisers. Well, let's get into our cruisers. So I personally only use Devastations. This is one with the Slaaneshi upgrade on it. Fairly standard looking. Actually, realistically, I would call it sedate by Slaaneshi standards, but obviously this game was designed to be a bit more PG than you might expect from these guys. Right, but what else do we have here? So we'll get to the Devastation last, because we're going to start at the top. So the Slaughter. Hull integrity 800, shield 200, 225 speed. Slaughters have the same speed as light cruisers, which does make them quite quick, especially for a cruiser. 10 degree a second rotation, 5,000 protection, 60 troop value, 12 turrets, and that standard 50 all round. They come with macro turrets, 270 degree top, a single macro turret, 4 of these twin linked batteries. So this is interesting, as this is the only example of this in the entire game where you get a twin linked battery like this. So you get both the macro and the lancers. As you can see though, is what you're getting here is, well, you get 4 to each side. The lancers, you get 2 attacks, which obviously 4 for the fact you have 2 of them on a side, 4 damage each, 8-second cooldown, 2% critical chance. Macros is 4 attacks, 3 damage, 3-second cooldown. The thing about the slaughters is that, especially for a Chaos fleet anyhow, they are short range. Chaos is primarily a long range style fleet, with lancers and ordnance being their primary weapons. So the slaughters can be useful if you want to build either a more enclosed fleet, or you want something, say, a little bit ahead. It's acting as sort of a tank or a spotting vessel, as they are quite quick for a cruiser. I did use them at one point for those sort of purposes, but I just tended to find is all it really meant was they died first. Yeah. And the final one is a missile pod turret. This also has a 270-degree frontal arc and sits on top, just like the macro turrets. Right, so our next one is the Carnage. So if we just have a quick look, you will see that the only real difference here is the speed, and this is the more standard speed for cruisers of 188. So up top we have that heavy macro and the heavy missile pod, which, as you can see, they actually start doing some quite decent damage at this size. 3 attacks, 10 damage each is quite decent, with a macro battery as our primary weapon on this. So 8 attacks with 2 per side, with us having 4 in total. That is a lot of macro fire coming in, but it is also relatively long range fire for macro weapons with a base range of 9,000. And as we remember from our accuracy, you know, you're only getting 40% of them hitting roughly. Now you can upgrade this obviously, but yeah, there's a reason they need to throw out that many. And as you can see, they're only doing 3 damage each, so they're not necessarily doing a lot of damage, especially as until you're getting close, they're not necessarily going to all be hitting. They have a low crit chance, so they're overall relatively weak as a weapon choice, but this is also your cheapest cruiser, so that one comes down to personal preference, but you won't generally see Carnages being used. The 2 primary fleet doctrines for Chaos are Ordnance and Lancers, but we'll talk more about that in another video anyhow. Right, so the murder. So just a quick look, again, same standard characteristics. So we'll move straight into the weapons. So the macro batteries on the side, this is exactly the same as the Carnage and the heavy prow lance. So by not having those top weapons, it does keep that point cost down. But yeah, it's arguable as to how useful the prow lance is. It does get 2 attacks, 8 damage, 8-second cooldown, quite a long range, decent critical chance. But that 90-degree front angle arc is always a problem, especially when the majority of your ship's weapons aren't pointing that way. Right, and the final one, the Devastation. This is my preference for cruisers, and you'll see why in a second. So up top again we have the macro turret and a missile pod. On our broadsides we have lance batteries, so 1 each side, 4 attacks, 4 damage, 12,000 range. 12,000 range. Yes, that is what I do like about them. You don't have to upgrade these ones, they come standard with that 12,000 range. And the ordnance launch bay, already gone through this. They are useful, I like them, and in Chaos you can have a lot of them. So obviously with the Lancers you're only going to get 1 at a time. With the Ordnance you will get both launching at the same time, so you get 2 waves of whichever one of those you're choosing to use. Right, so that's our cruisers. Let's have a look at our battle cruisers. This is Styx with the Zench upgrade again. Right, so orders and traits are standard. Right, so starting at the top, we've got the Acheron. I may not have pronounced that correctly. I apologise to anyone who may have a better way of pronouncing it, but that's how I pronounce it. So, 800 hull, 200 shield, 188 speed, a 10 degree a second rotation, 5,000 detection, 60 troop value, 15 defensive turrets, and the 50 all-round armour. So, how are we arming ourselves? We have a 270 degree frontal arc heavy macro turret, a heavy missile pod, again with that 270 degree frontal arc. We also happen to have two 270 degree frontal arc lance turrets. And on top of all that, we have broadside lance batteries, 2 each side. As you can see, the primary weapon type on this ship is lance batteries. So this fits right into one of the main doctrines of the Chaos Fleet. Right, so again, characteristics tend to be rather standard across a class of ship. So with the Hades, what do we have weapon-wise? Macro batteries for our broadsides, 2 lance turrets up top, and then a heavy prow lance. So I just pretty much would not even consider the Hades. As you can see, my personal preference is I have 1 Styx and 1 Acheron, and this mostly comes down to whether I am going to be primarily using lances or ordnance. And if I'm using ordnance, it will be the 6. So again, the characteristics are standard. Weapon loadouts where it's at. I have a super heavy missile pod turret, a super heavy macro turret. Realistically, you'll notice that the stats aren't overly changing for these. It's mostly just range is what's improving between, say, this super heavy and the Acheron's just straight up heavy. So you see there, the heavy's 9,000, heavy's 9,000. We come down here where we've got super heavies, and now they're 12,000. Again, we've got some lance turrets on top as well, and then 4 ordnance launch bays. This is a lot of ordnance. So that's 4 squadrons of fighters acting in defense, and 4 bomber squadrons, which is probably the most important. That's a lot. It really is. A Styx and a couple of Hellbringer Mark IIs, all launching their ordnance at a single light cruiser, depending on race. So mostly Eldar, Tau, and Space Marines. You can take out that light cruiser. Caveat on that being that all bombers have to make it through and do their damage, but it is a theoretical possibility. It does happen. I have seen it happen. And certainly if you're running, say, multiple Styxes, or you've got it backed up by Devastation as well, that it should be enough damage with all of the ordnance getting through. Right. So that's our battle cruisers. That leaves us with the big ships, the battleships. So this is a Despoiler with the Nurgle upgrade. Nurgle really does distort a lot. So yeah, and gives it that lovely miasma around it. And as you can see, in the middle of our fleet here we have the Planet Killer. Actually, I don't think it's the actual Planet Killer. It looks a bit small compared to the one you actually face in the single player campaign. That could just be the angle. It certainly does look like another battleship though. So again, our traits and orders are the same as the rest of our fleet. What do we have as our actual ships though? So just a quick look so we can see it both at the same time here. Same for everything except speed. The Desolator is quicker. at 188 versus the Despoiler at 150. But weapon-wise, what do we have? We have 2 super heavy missile pod turrets. That gives us that 270-degree frontal arc and a 12,000 range. The only other ship besides our escort ship with torps, Prow super heavy torpedo launcher. It's launching 8 of those suckers. And Lance batteries. 6 of them. So it is a lot of Lance batteries. Now this is not my personal preference, as with the Lance batteries it only covers off on one of the doctrines. Without having a lot of other torpedoes, it's not actually that useful having torps. They tend to actually really work better when you have a lot of ships with torpedoes, as you can box ships in using torpedoes. And the missile pods, well, I mean, they're not doing bad damage as per se, but you really don't want to be relying on them for it. So the Despoiler, here's the one I tend to play with. So we got heavy macro batteries. Yes, I know, I've complained about them before, but it's made up by the fact that I get 4 ordnance launch bays. These ones happen to be in the prow. 3 Lance turrets on top. So that gives us that 270-degree frontal arc. So this now fits into both of my doctrines. And then I have a super heavy prow lance. That's 4 attacks, 8 damage each. So, you know, you get this puppy shooting into things, and it really does do quite a bit of damage. So, that's it. That's all of the ships. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. There'll be another couple of videos to do the upgrade skills, favors and crew, and another one to do the basic fleet strategies and tactics. You've heard me more or less mention the 2 main doctrines. We'll talk more in depth about those and the sorts of ships used. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this, and please join us again.